Hello and welcome to another build video. Today I'll be walking you through my Dark Paladin build, which is a great build because it excels both at single target damage with upcasted crit smites, but also has great AoE and crowd control if you use all of your cleric spells. In this video I'll be showing you everything you need to know to make this build yourself, from spells to items, levels, consumables, buffs. All there is to know you will learn in this video. But let's just get right into the build. For your class, you're gonna start as Paladin, obviously, and choose whatever subclass you like. I like to go Oathbreaker, just so I get the Oathbreaker dialogue tags, because you only go 2 levels into Paladin. The perks you get from your subclass don't really matter that much. And Oathbreaker just has the most evil dialogue tags, which is why I like to use it. Your ability scores do matter much more, and you want to take everything out of strength. Get 14 dex for the +2 armor class if you're using medium armor, constitution to 16 for the extra health, and wisdom, since it's going to be your main spellcasting modifier, you want to go to 17, and just put 2 points into charisma so you don't get negative dialogue stuff. Your proficiencies don't matter too much. All you need to make sure is that you have athletics to 1, and then the rest however you like. Going into our level ups, we are going to take 1 more level into Paladin, and the fighting style of choice is going to be dueling. If you decide to modify this build and choose another weapon or a different fighting style, just make sure you also change to this. And for your spells, since these are the Paladin spells, they don't matter at all. You're gonna have enough spells from Cleric soon enough. At level 3, you're going to multi-class into Cleric, get some quality of life cantrips. These are just for dialogue and saving throws. And your domain of choice is going to be War Domain. War Domain is great because you get the extra attack charges, allowing you to attack with a bonus action. And since this build doesn't get extra attack, you do want some form of extra attack in your build, since sometimes you do need that extra attack to finish off an enemy. Your deity is up to you. I like to use Lolth if my theme is much evil. And your proficiencies don't matter at all since Cleric doesn't get any good ones. Spells are much more important, but I think it's much better if I just go through all spells after we level up. It's much easier to explain that way. At level 4, you're gonna get your first level 2 spell slots. The spell slots are going to be a bit delayed because you're 2 levels into Paladin, and Paladin is only a half caster, so the first level doesn't have any spell slots, meaning it's all delayed by 1. Which is fine in the end, just so you know. And you also get your Channel Divinity, which is great for Paladins because even if you miss an attack, you can use your Channel Divinity to get a +10 bonus to your attack roll. So the only way you can miss an attack is by critical missing, which if you have advantage is basically impossible. So great Channel Divinity to have. At level 5 Cleric, you are going to get another cantrip, and you also get level 3 spell slots. Again, those are a bit delayed, but great to have. You also get your first feat. And as for every single Paladin build that uses smites, you need Savage Attacker. Savage Attacker basically buffs your smite because it rerolls every single damage dice and takes the highest result. It's basically advantage for damage dice, meaning you always deal much higher damage. Because it can easily happen that you smite, but every single damage dice in the smite just rolls low and you deal very low damage. Savage Attacker usually prevents that, so it's an awesome feat to have on a Paladin. This is your second Channel Divinity feature, but it's useless if you're on solo honor mode, since you're not gonna have any ally who attacks. If you're playing this build in a group, this is very nice to have. At level 7 cleric you get your level 4 spell slot, and you also get a bunch more spells. Again, I will cover all the spells after we finish leveling up. At level 10 you get your next feat, and this feat is more up to you, but I personally like to use Polearm Master if I happen to use a polearm, which we do, because of the main feature, which is the opportunity attack when an enemy comes into range. Usually opportunity attacks only occur if an enemy leaves your melee range, but this one is the opposite, as in when an enemy approaches you, you can immediately stab them and deal damage. You can also use your smite reaction on this opportunity attack, meaning if the enemy is squishy enough, you will most likely one-shot them, just with a reaction, which is great value. You also get this bonus action attack, which is useful sometimes, but you already have your extra attack on a bonus action from your War Priest charges, so it's not that great, but still nice to have if you want to save up your charges of the extra attack. At our last level we get another cantrip. At this point it really doesn't matter what you choose. And you also get your level 6 spell slot, which is fantastic for upcasting. Sadly this build doesn't get any level 6 spells, but you do still get the level 6 spell slot, which allows you to upcast lower level spells for much higher damage. You also get Divine Intervention, which is fantastic to have on honor mode, obviously, since you can revive and heal up all your party members, or just yourself if you're playing solo. But let's now cover the spells. You have a ton of options on Cleric, and the great thing about Cleric is that you can always prepare and unprepare all your spells, so none of the choices you make are finite unless you are mid-combat. For your level 1 spells, you're gonna want to choose Inflict Wounds for the evil theme, and it also deals a huge amount of damage even when upcasted, since it gets 1d10 per upcast level, meaning if you upcast it to level 6, you're gonna deal 8 to 80 damage, just base, which is fantastic. Your other spells are gonna be Sanctuary, because it's just overpowered. And you can use Command and whatever other spells you like on level 1. Level 2 gives you Hold Person, which is great for Paladins, since it guarantees critical hits on smites. And it also gives you 8, which gives you 5 healing, or 5 more HP to be more precise. And you can also upcast it, so at level 6 you get a huge chunk of HP. And you can also use this amulet to regain the level 6 spell slot immediately, so effectively you just get free HP. At level 3 you get Glyph of Warding, which is an awesome spell. It is a bit weaker than Fireball, but you can make it deal any damage type, which is way more versatile. And you also get Remove Curse and Daylight, which are very helpful in specific situations. And also Bestow Curse, which can make enemies skip their turn or take extra damage. Great to have. Level 4 you get Death Ward, which is the only spell I would select from level 4 because the other two are bad. And at level 5 you get access to Contagion, which is a fantastic spell, and the main reason why we go so high into Cleric and don't just go 5 levels into Paladin for the extra attack. Because this spell does something incredibly strong. This spell has 6 different variants, but the only 2 you really care about is this one. Wait, no. This one. There we go. Flesh Rot. The way Contagion works is the following. You apply the spell, and once you apply it, a competition starts, basically. A competition between succeeding and failing saving throws at the target. Meaning, if the target fails 3 saving throws, the effect will be applied, and if it succeeds 3, the effect won't be applied. So whatever one reaches 3 first will be the result. And this totally depends on your spell save DC, so if you just have high spell save DC, after 3 turns, this effect will most likely be applied. And as you might have already read, this specific effect makes it so whatever target you apply this to is vulnerable to every single damage type. This is beyond broken. Vulnerable means they take double damage from whatever you do. This includes smites. So you can easily deal like 200, 300 damage with one smite if you crit and then have the target be vulnerable. You also have inflict wounds, which you can upcast to level 6 for that 8 to 80 damage. And most importantly, this lasts until long rest, so it's not for 2 turns or something. It's until long rest. You can attack this target for a huge chunk of damage. Now granted, this spell doesn't work against every single enemy. Any Paladin over level 3 won't be affected because of Divine Health. This includes people like Merkul, Dame Aelin, the Oathbreaker Knight, all those. And for some reason it also doesn't work on Raphael. I tried and I failed, which is very sad. But on most enemies, like most more tanky enemies, it does work. But there's another variant of it that is equally strong. Slimy Doom. This is very annoying to use against people, or I guess annoying for the people, because they get stunned every single turn if you hit them. You can basically incapacitate someone forever using this spell. Because it's whenever they are hit, they don't need to. They don't roll a saving throw against this. It's just whenever they are hit, they get stunned. That's it. As soon as they fail the first 3, this will apply every time, which is crazy. So this is the main spell. Why we want Cleric so high. It's incredibly underrated. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, but it's incredibly powerful. But let's just complete our spell list. At level 5, we also get Insect Plague, which is great for our evil cleric theme. Also is great crowd control. And lastly, we have the spells that are always prepared, and I'm gonna tell you which one of these are actually useful. Hold Monster is great because it works on Orin and Raphael. Both of those are classified as monsters, so this works on them. But it is to be noted that Raphael only gets stunned by this for 1 turn maximum because of his like resolve ability or whatever. You also have Spirit Guardians, which is top 5 spells in the game. You cast it once and then deal up to 48 damage per turn to any enemy around you if you upcast it to level 6 and the enemy is just not vulnerable, just nothing, just basic 48 damage. Obviously this gets better if you have Contagion on the enemy, but this is more for crowd control than single target damage. But it lasts for 10 turns, deals damage every turn, and they get less movement speed. It's just fantastic. The other spells aren't too great, but Shield of Faith is useful, mostly because we're going to use an equipment that benefits from it, but more on that in the items tab. But I think this is all the spells covered you need. Obviously, the main reason you want these spell slots is not because of your cleric spells, even though all of them are very useful. You're going to want to upcast your smites. As you can see, if I equip any melee weapon, we can upcast our smite up to level 4, dealing a huge chunk of extra radiant damage. Sadly, after level 4 it doesn't deal more damage based on the upcast. It still deals the level 4 damage, but it doesn't deal more equal to the level. But you still have a huge chunk of extra damage. I'd recommend using only up to level 4 for smites and having these for the cleric spells, just because the cleric spells get more value from the upcast, but it's totally up to you. One last thing before we get to the items that I forgot to mention earlier when we leveled up. The cleric also gets Divine Strike, which is just 1d8 of the cleric's damage type per turn extra for 1 melee attack. This is nice to have, especially with War Cleric, because War Cleric also uses this based on your melee weapon. Other clerics get like 1d8 fire damage or whatever, but your War Cleric just deals melee weapon damage, which is awesome. Just a quick note before we go to the items. Next up, we have our items in the equipment list. I have split these into whatever act we obtain them in, so it's easier for you to follow and maybe update your build as you go through your playthrough. I've received this as feedback on my last build videos, so I'm trying to implement it this one. Let me know what you think about it, and I will try to keep this up for other, future build videos as well. Yeah, let's just go into the items then. Our Act 1 items are going to be these ones. Obviously there are other items that work with this build and somehow benefit from the build, but these are the ones I mainly use, so I'm just gonna show them. And I'm gonna replace them as we go. Our boots are going to be Mintharos boots. They just make it so whenever you're concentrating you can't be moved by force, which is great because that includes every single spell, action, whatever that can move you, it just doesn't anymore. Your chest piece is going to be the adamantine split armor from Grinforge. This is probably one of the best defensive pieces of armor in the entirety of Act 1 and 2. So awesome to have for the early game, especially because you can get it without fighting anything by just cheesing Grim. Next we have the Grimskull helmet. Same source, you just get it from Grim as a drop. And it gives you resistance to fire damage, which is great if you're not a tiefling. And it also gives you a Hadassah mark, free damage for the early game. Your rings are going to be +1 armor class, ring of protection from Mole, and the Volo ring for bless on heal. Korgar's amulet also works great. Extra poison damage, also it is on theme with the Loath Paladin, but even if you don't use Loath as your deity, it's still a great amulet to have. You can also use the Gloves of Dexterity, which are kinda decent. They're not great for your build, but they're just good to have because of the extra attack roll and initiative bonus from Dex. Your amulet can also be replaced by one of these, but I honestly think this provides more value to you. This one is just restoring one level 3 spell slot, so it's more of a resource. You could just equip it, restore the spell slot and then unequip it. This one is a one-time use per long rest, where you can make an enemy vulnerable to any damage type that is physical, and for one hit they're gonna take double damage from that hit, but it's just for one hit, and your main damage type is radiant, so it's not that great. And lastly you have the amulet that makes it so whenever you're healed, you heal the maximum amount of hit points possible. This is good to have and honestly probably on par in terms of value with this one. I just prefer this one, so choose whatever you like. Lastly we have the weapons, which are either the Blood of the Thunder, which is your classic Act 2 good weapon, but honestly I think this one is better for two reasons. One, it reduces your critical hit threshold by 1, which is great for smites because you deal so much more damage on a crit. And also, it makes it so whenever you roll 2 or less, you re-roll the dice. You already have Savage Attacker, which should make it nearly impossible to roll a 2, but if you somehow roll a 2, this knife is gonna re-roll that anyway. So you get 2 re-rolls on your dice, basically making it impossible to roll low on your damage. And you also get advantage against lightly or heavily obscured targets, which is nice in Act 2, because there's so much dark space. Lastly, your bow is going to be this one. It gives you advantage against monstrosity types enemies, which doesn't just apply to ranged attacks, it also applies to your melee attacks, so your smites get advantage against any monstrosity you're fighting. Great to have. Next, you have your Act 2 items. Again, as we go, I'm gonna replace these old ones, but if you prefer their effects over whatever I'm replacing them with, you can obviously keep them. First, we have our rings. We get the Shadow Cloaked ring in Act 2, which is an insanely good ring, gives you 1d4 extra damage if the target is slightly or heavily obscured. We have the Ring of Free Action, which I always use if I fight anyone who can paralyze me, because getting paralyzed on solo honor mode is pretty devastating, but this just prevents that entirely. And you also get Executioner, which is similar to these, like these two, as in it's a once per long rest feature, so just equip it, use it, unequip it, be done with it. That's pretty simple. In terms of armor, you get a bunch of choices in Act 2. Most importantly, these two pieces, which are from Shadowheart. When she kills the Night Song, Shah gives her these, and they are pretty strong. The gauntlets give you 1d4 necrotic damage, so you just replace your dexterity gauntlets with them. And they also give you access to Beckoning Darkness, which you can cast at will without a cost aside from the bonus action. Admittedly, this spell isn't that great, but it's on theme with a Dark Paladin, so I decided to use it. But most importantly, you get the chestplate, which is actually better than the Adamantine Split armor, which is a high bar, because it does a bunch of things. First of all, it gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws, which also means it gives you advantage on concentration saving throws, because those are Constitution checks. This means whatever spell you're concentrating on, and basically all of the cleric spells are concentration based, you're gonna have advantage on basically never failing to concentrate on it. Especially if you have like a high value spell like an upcast Spirit Guardians. Getting broken on it is devastating, so this armor just prevents that usually. You also, even though it says right now 17 armor class, less than this one, you get the +2 from dexterity, so you have more value from that, and in total more armor class. Additionally, you get the free cast of Shield of Faith, which gives you 2 more armor class. And even if you run out of this one, like if this one gets broken, you can still cast your own, which also works. While Shield of Faith is active with this armor, you get -2 damage from all sources, and obviously the base extra armor class from Shield of Faith as well. So great piece of armor. I used this all throughout Act 3 as well, but you can just swap it off later for whatever pieces you like here. Next, we are going to cover the best piece of equipment you get from Shah when killing Night Song, which is your main weapon. This spear does a lot. First of all, it deals 1d6 extra damage to targets that are lightly or heavily obscured, which is fantastic since, just like the ring, this applies almost all the time, so don't worry about it being situational. Next, you can't be blinded, so whenever you cast darkness or stand in darkness, you're totally fine, but everyone around you is blinded, so you get advantage against them. And also, you get this special weapon action, which creates a cloud of darkness around you, so you just stand in there, are basically unhittable with range attacks, and get so much value from just one attack, which is great. Also, since this is a legendary weapon, it gets a huge bonus in damage and weapon enchantment. Just great overall. Next, you get your first cloak, which is the +1 armor class cloak. You get the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, which gives you basically more spell save DC whenever you attack, which is great if you want to synergize your spells with your smites. You get Catholic Shield, which also gives you more spell save DC, but if you already have the same, it's really not necessary. Instead, you can keep this shield from Act 1, which I forgot to mention. Or you can swap it out for either this one, for more initiative, or this shield for the 10 extra HP, if you decide to not cast 8 yourself, and instead just use this. And you also get 1 more level 1 spell slot for 1 more smite or whatever you want to use. I prefer this one over this, but it's up to you. Next, we have our bow replacement. The advantage against monstrosity types is nice, but I think fire resistance and cold resistance is better, so I use this one. You also get a free cast of haste from it, so it's just great overall. You also get these 2 items, which are not good on their own, but they provide a unique buff. This one buffs your weapon for 1d4 more damage and +1 weapon enchantment. And this one buffs your save, so you get advantage on all attack rolls. So just equip these, apply the buff, and unequip these. As for actual items you want to use, you get a new pair of boots, which if you don't like the prone stuff from the Minthara boots, you can swap these on for more armor class. And you also get the gloves of the duelist. if you do not like the 1d4 necrotic damage and would rather have higher hit chance, you can use these and get the benefit. But I think that's all of Act 2 covered, except for, I guess, these one-time use items, which aren't as useful, but this one is kinda useful if you want to use it on Saravok, because he can be paralyzed by it, or just Gortash as well, and you can just crit smite them into oblivion. But you can also use Hold Person, so it's not that useful overall. And again, like I mentioned when I talked about the spades, this one can be used to regain the spell slot after casting 8 to basically make 8 a free cast. Yeah, I think that's all of the Act 2 items covered. So let's now finish the build with our Act 3 items. First, we're gonna replace the Bless Ring with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. This allows you to cast any illusion or enchantment spell as a bonus action after attacking with a weapon attack. Illusion or enchantment spells are a lot of spells, and even if you don't have the spells yourself, like we have only a few of them. For example, Hold Person, which is great as a bonus action, but there are many more that are useful that we don't get access to as a cleric. So what we do is just keep them as scrolls in our inventory, and this also works. So if you want to save spell slots or just want to use spells you don't get access to, have them as scrolls in your inventory, and you can cast them as a bonus action using this ring. Very useful. I like this ring a lot, so I swap it on. Next, you can upgrade your bow to the Hellrider Longbow. It gives you +3 to initiative, basically making this shield useless. So you can swap on the Shield of the Undervowed. Shield of the Undervowed gives people disadvantage against your fear spells. This isn't... technically this isn't useful for this build, because this build can't actually cast fear on its own. You can only get it from scrolls. I just like using it because it's on theme with the evil Paladin build. But if you don't want to use scrolls, this shield is pointless to you. I just like using it. Next we have the Vicious Shortbow. Since you're gonna be critting a lot, Dolor Armorers is gonna bring you great value. So if you have this sheet instead for the initiative, you can swap on this bow and get the extra damage. We also have the Helldusk Boots, which are a straight upgrade to these ones because they just always give the perk that you can't be proned or knocked around. And they also give many more benefits. For example, being able to reroll a save whenever you like to is fantastic. And you get them without any combat as well, just from Gortash's chest. We also have the Amulet of Greater Health, which you can get from Raphael's House of Hope. And if you do the heist correctly, you can just get it and leave without him appearing. This just sets your constitution to 23, which gives you a bunch more HP, and this is without 8, so 8 gives you even more if you upcast it, making you incredibly tanky, as you can see. You also get the Helmet of Balduran, which if you do not want the Arcane Acuity, which I would recommend having, but if you don't want it, you can equip this for crit immunity and the healing. And if you do have the healing, you might want to equip this one, because then you get the 1d6 poison damage immediately every turn. These synergize well, so I like having them both equipped. But if you don't have this one, swap on this and just have the higher spell save DC. Oh yeah, the major Act 3 item is obviously, as per usual, the Ballast Armor. Double piercing damage around you. So if you really want to go for that huge burst damage, this is probably the armor you're looking for. I'm using this on a lot of builds recently, just because it's so strong. But if you're gonna go for more of the cleric side of your build, this armor set is probably much better. And lastly, you want to use these gloves if you go for full cleric, because if you hold person someone, the -5 penalty from spell might doesn't really matter, because your spell attack roll is always going to be 100%, and you deal 1d8 extra damage. So if you want to one-shot somebody, using inflict wounds, you should probably equip these gloves. But yeah, I think that's all of the items covered. So next we're gonna talk about the elixirs and buffs you need. You obviously get a lot of buffs from just your spells alone. For example, Death Ward is great, and protection from poison you get, and all of these other buffs. So depending on what situation you're in, you might want to look into applying these. Some of them require concentration, this one doesn't, so always have it applied if you're up against someone who can cloud kill you, or literally anyone dealing poison damage. I think a great use case for this is either the Balthazar fight, any of the anti-Ethel fights, or just the Saravok fight, because one of the echoes can cast Cloud Kill on you. The other buffs, as I said, usually require concentration, which is pretty bad, to be fair, because your concentration is always gonna be either Shield of Faith or Spirit Guardians. So any concentration based buffs, you should really think about whether you need them or not, because your concentration is pretty valuable. As for potion buffs, obviously the usual ones were great here. Haste, Invisibility for the free surprise round, and Universal Resistance is always great, just gives you resistance to all damage types. If you're in a fight where you fear dying and where a lot of damage is coming your way, these will save your life. Our Cloud Giant Strength, as per usual, is gonna be our main damage source, since we're attacking with a melee weapon. You can also use Bloodlust, but if you do use Bloodlust, I would recommend changing your stats up a bit, so you don't have that 8 strength. Like, obviously you can't see it right now because the elixir is active, but I have 8 strength below this, so if you do use Bloodlust, go for like 16 strength instead, and just sacrifice wisdom. But if you just go for the Cleric Paladin build, I'd recommend always using this one. Next we have the weapon buffs that are just depending on what target you're fighting. If it can be paralyzed, I'd recommend using this one. Unless you want to go for a scripted kill, then you want to go for this one just because it's guaranteed to paralyze. Otherwise, just go for this one if it's like Raphael or anyone else who is resistant to non-magical physical damage. Or just get extra attack rolls, whatever you feel like. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you learned something new and found this build guide helpful. If you did, consider liking and or subscribing. If you have any questions, comment below, I will answer all of them. And any feedback to my videos is much appreciated. I'm still very new to this whole YouTube thing, so any ideas or suggestions would be very welcome. I have a bunch of very fun builds upcoming even before patch 8, so if you want to see those, just subscribe to not miss them. But most importantly, have a great day and I'll see you in the next video.